He told me, "You'll never leave me." So I made sure. Everyone at his birthday heard me say goodbye. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I met Daniel on a Tuesday in March, during one of those unseasonably warm days when the city feels like it's waking up from hibernation. He was standing in line behind me at a coffee shop, and when I dropped my wallet, he picked it up with such genuine concern that I actually believed the universe had sent me someone kind. "You look like you're having the kind of day that needs more than just coffee," he said, smiling in a way that made his entire face light up. "How about dinner instead?" I should have said no. I was busy, focused on my career, enjoying my independence. But there was something magnetic about him. The way he listened when I spoke, like every word mattered. The way he remembered small details. My favorite flower, the name of my childhood dog, the fact that I liked my tea with honey, not sugar. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. Within 6, I'd moved into his apartment, a beautiful loft in the financial district with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that made you feel like you owned the sky. Within a year, we were married in a ceremony so perfect it could have been on the cover of a magazine. Everyone said I was lucky. My mother cried tears of joy. My friends gushed about how romantic he was, how successful, how devoted. And I believed them. I believed I had found my fairy tale. The first crack appeared so subtly, I almost missed it. It was a Thursday evening, and I was getting ready to meet my college roommate Sarah for drinks. Daniel came home early from work and found me doing my makeup in the bathroom. "Where are you going?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Meeting Sarah, remember? I told you last week." "Right?" He nodded slowly, but something in his expression shifted. "It's just, I had a really tough day. I was hoping we could spend the evening together, just us." The guilt hit me immediately. Here was my husband, vulnerable and needing me, and I was running off to gossip over cocktails. "I can reschedule," I offered. No. He waved his hand dismissively, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. "Go, have fun. I'll just be here. Alone." I canceled on Sarah. Daniel's face lit up with such genuine happiness that I felt warm inside, like I'd made the right choice. He ordered my favorite takeout. We watched a movie curled up on the couch, and he whispered in my ear, "This is perfect. Just you and me. That's all we need." At the time, it felt romantic. Now I know it was the first brick in the wall he was building around me. The incidents started piling up, each one individually explainable, collectively damning. He didn't like my friend Marcus because he's clearly in love with you. He thought my work events were boring networking bullshit, where people just got drunk and unprofessional. He suggested I quit my job because, "You're so stressed, baby, and we don't need the money anyway." The transformation was so gradual, I didn't notice I was becoming someone else. Someone smaller. Someone who asked permission to see her own mother. Someone who checked her phone anxiously every 20 minutes, because if she didn't respond immediately, the interrogation would begin. "Who were you talking to? Why didn't you answer? What were you really doing?" He never yelled. That's what made it so insidious. He would just get quiet, wounded, disappointed. He would explain so patiently why my behavior hurt him, why I was being selfish, why if I really loved him, I would understand. I started walking on eggshells, calculating every decision through the lens of his potential reaction. My world contracted. Friends stopped calling after enough canceled plans. My career stagnated because I couldn't focus, couldn't commit to late meetings or business trips without triggering a crisis at home. The financial control came next, disguised as romance. "Let me take care of everything," he said one Sunday morning, bringing me coffee in bed. You shouldn't have to worry about bills and budgets. I want to spoil you. He consolidated our accounts, put everything in his name for tax purposes, gave me a credit card, his credit card, with spending limits that required his approval. Every purchase became a negotiation, every expense a potential point of conflict. $400 at the salon? Really? He would show me the statement, his eyebrows raised. That seems excessive, doesn't it? I started buying cheaper clothes, skipping haircuts, making myself smaller in every possible way. But the worst part, the part that nearly broke me, was the way he made me doubt my own mind. I would remember conversations that he insisted never happened, plans we'd made that he claimed were my imagination, things he'd said that he swore I'd misheard. He was so calm, so certain, so reasonable in his explanations that I began to wonder if I was losing my grip on reality. Was I crazy? Was I the problem? Was I the one destroying our marriage with my paranoia and insecurity? "You're being dramatic," became his favorite phrase. "You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. You're remembering it wrong." I stopped trusting my own perceptions. I stopped trusting myself. 3 years into our marriage, I was a ghost of the woman I'd been. I had no job, no friends, no money, no independence. I had Daniel, and Daniel had made sure that was all I had. And then came the phrase that would haunt me for the next 2 years. We were having one of our discussions, his word for the marathon arguments, where he systematically dismantled every point I tried to make. I had suggested, timidly, that maybe I should look for part-time work, just something to keep me engaged. His face went cold in a way I'd never seen before. "You're not going anywhere," he said quietly. "You think you can just leave? Start over? You have nothing. You are nothing without me. No job, no money, no references after 3 years out of the workforce. Who would even want you?" I stood there frozen as he stepped closer. "You'll never leave me," he continued, and there was something almost tender in his voice, like he was comforting a child. "You can't. You need me, and deep down, you know it." He kissed my forehead and left for work. I sat on the kitchen floor for 2 hours, sobbing, because I knew he was right. I was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. The shift began with a library book. It sounds absurd, almost laughably mundane, but that's how trapped I was. A library book became an act of rebellion. Daniel had gone on a business trip, one of his frequent 3-day excursions, where he called me 4 times a day and tracked my phone location to make sure I stayed home. I was in the grocery store, mechanically moving through the aisles with the list he'd left me, when I saw the library branch next door. I hadn't been inside a library in years. Daniel thought reading was a waste of time when you could be doing something useful. I don't know what possessed me to go inside. Maybe it was the spring sunshine. Maybe it was the exhaustion of being afraid all the time. Maybe it was just luck. I wandered the shelves aimlessly, my fingers trailing over spines. And then I saw it. A book with a simple title about recognizing emotional abuse in relationships. I pulled it out, fully intending to put it back immediately, but then I opened to a random page. Does your partner monitor your phone, email, or social media? Do you feel like you need permission to see friends or family? Have you stopped doing activities you once enjoyed? Do you feel anxious about their reaction to normal, everyday decisions? My hands started shaking. I read the entire first chapter, standing between the shelves, tears streaming down my face, because every single word described my life. Every single word. I checked out the book with a temporary card, hid it in my purse, and devoured it that night after Daniel fell asleep. I read it cover to cover, and then I read it again. And again. The book had a name for what I was experiencing: coercive control, financial abuse, isolation, gaslighting, emotional manipulation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't oversensitive. I wasn't the problem. Daniel was abusing me. The word felt shocking, almost too big. Abuse was violence, bruises, black eyes. Abuse wasn't a successful lawyer in a beautiful apartment who bought expensive jewelry and took me on romantic vacations. Abuse wasn't a man who'd never once raised his hand to me. But there it was, in black and white, in careful psychological terms. What I was experiencing was abuse, and it was destroying me. The book's final chapter was about safety planning and escape. It emphasized that leaving an abusive relationship was the most dangerous time, that it had to be done carefully, strategically, with preparation and support. I started planning that night. The first thing I did was recover my old email account. Daniel had convinced me to share a joint email, so we never miss anything important, which meant he read every message I sent and received. But my old account still existed, dormant but accessible. I changed the password to something he'd never guess and set up two-factor authentication on my phone. I created a new, secret folder, buried in my apps where I could hide things. I turned off location sharing in a way that looked like a technical glitch. Small steps, invisible steps. Next, I needed documentation. The book stressed this repeatedly. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Without my own money or resources, I would need to prove what was happening to get legal protection and financial support. I started a journal, documenting every incident with dates and details. I took screenshots of his controlling text messages, of the bank statements showing how he controlled every penny, of the phone tracking software I discovered he'd installed on my device. I emailed everything to my secret account, creating a growing file of evidence. I began researching divorce lawyers, support services, women's shelters. I learned about financial abuse laws, marital asset division, restraining orders. I educated myself with the fervor of someone studying for the most important exam of their life. Because it was. This was an exam where failure meant staying trapped forever. The hardest part was maintaining the facade. Every morning, I woke up and pretended to be the docile, grateful wife he expected. I smiled, I cooked, I asked permission. I made myself small. But inside, I was building an escape route brick by brick. 2 months into my planning, I made a crucial decision. I needed legal help, and I needed it before I left. I couldn't afford to make mistakes. The problem was obvious. I had no money for a lawyer. Daniel controlled everything. Every purchase showed up on statements he reviewed meticulously. I couldn't even buy a coffee without him knowing. That's when I thought of Thomas Warren. Thomas was Daniel's attorney, the man who'd handled our prenup, our estate planning, our business affairs. He'd been to our house for dinner parties. He knew Daniel professionally and personally. It was an insane idea. Dangerous. Thomas was Daniel's man, loyal to the person who paid him. But something about Thomas had always struck me as different. He was older, maybe in his early 60s, with kind eyes and a wedding ring he twisted when he was uncomfortable. At those dinner parties, I'd caught him watching Daniel sometimes, with an expression I couldn't quite read. And once, just once, when Daniel had snapped at me over something trivial in front of guests, Thomas had quietly said, "That was unnecessary, Daniel." Daniel had laughed it off, but I'd never forgotten it. I had nothing to lose. If Thomas told Daniel, I was finished anyway. If he didn't, I might have a chance. I waited until Daniel's next business trip, then called Thomas's office from a burner phone I'd bought with cash I'd been skimming from grocery money for weeks. "Thomas Warren's office," the receptionist answered. "I need to speak with Mr. Warren. It's urgent. My name is Catherine Reeves." There was a pause. "Mrs. Reeves, if this is regarding your husband's legal matters—" "It's not. It's about my own. Please, I just need 15 minutes. I'll explain everything." Another pause, longer this time. "Hold, please." I waited, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. This was it. The moment where I either found an ally or condemned myself. "Catherine," Thomas's voice came on the line, careful and concerned. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said simply. "Nothing is all right, and I need help." Thomas agreed to meet me the next day at a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods away, from anywhere Daniel might go. I took 2 buses to get there, paid in cash, wore sunglasses, and a hat, like I was in some kind of spy thriller. When I arrived, Thomas was already there, sitting in a back corner booth with 2 untouched cups of coffee in front of him. He stood when he saw me, and his face registered shock. I must have looked terrible. I'd lost weight, I knew. I didn't sleep well. I'd stopped wearing makeup because Daniel said it meant I was trying to impress other men. The vibrant woman he'd met at Daniel's office 4 years ago was gone. "Sit," he said gently, gesturing to the booth. "Talk to me." So I did. I told him everything. 3 years of systematic isolation, control, manipulation, financial abuse, the monitoring, the gaslighting, the threats. The way Daniel had transformed from my fairy tale into my jailer. I expected skepticism. I expected him to defend Daniel, to make excuses, to tell me I was exaggerating. That's what everyone did with men like Daniel, successful, charming, respected men who committed their abuse behind closed doors. Instead, Thomas listened in absolute silence, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he sat back and exhaled slowly. "I knew," he said finally. "God help me, I knew something was wrong." I stared at him. "What?" "The prenup he insisted on, the way it was structured. I told him it was unnecessarily one-sided. He said you'd agreed to everything, that you didn't care about money, but the way he talked about it, the level of control." Thomas shook his head. "And at those dinners, the way he spoke to you sometimes, the way you flinched. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I was reading too much into things." "Why are you helping me now?" I asked quietly. Thomas was silent for a long moment, twisting his wedding ring. 23 years ago, my sister left her husband. He was a lot like Daniel, successful, charming, controlling. She tried to leave 3 times. The 3rd time, he killed her. My blood ran cold. "I swore I'd never ignore the signs again," Thomas continued. "And I've been ignoring them with you. I'm done ignoring them." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal pad. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to help you leave Daniel safely and permanently. I'm going to make sure you're protected legally and financially, and I'm going to make sure he can't hurt you." Sighs. Over the next 2 hours, Thomas outlined a plan with the precision of a military operation. We would gather additional documentation over the next month. He would quietly investigate Daniel's finances and business practices. If he's controlling you this way, I guarantee there are other ethical violations. We would open a bank account in my name at a different bank, slowly transferring small amounts that Daniel wouldn't notice. We would prepare restraining order paperwork, divorce filings, everything ready to go simultaneously. "The key is timing," Thomas explained. "We hit him with everything at once, before he has time to react or retaliate. Restraining order, divorce papers, frozen accounts, evidence of abuse filed with the court. Overwhelming force." "He'll destroy me," I whispered. "He'll try," Thomas acknowledged. "But Catherine, I've been his attorney for 10 years. I know where all the bodies are buried. And if he comes after you, I'll make sure every unethical thing he's ever done ends up in front of the State Bar Association." It was the first time in years I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. The next month was the longest of my life. I was a double agent in my own marriage, playing the perfect wife while systematically dismantling the cage Daniel had built around me. Thomas worked quickly and quietly. He found that Daniel had been hiding assets, routing money through shell companies, avoiding taxes in ways that ranged from gray to outright illegal. He had affairs documented in hotel receipts and text messages. He had threatened business partners, fabricated evidence in court cases, committed perjury. Daniel, it turned out, was not just an abuser. He was a criminal in an expensive suit. "The question is what you want to do with this," Thomas said during one of our secret meetings. "We can use it as leverage in the divorce, or we can report it to the authorities." "Can we do both?" I asked. Thomas smiled grimly. Yes, we can." I opened my own bank account with Thomas's help, using my maiden name and my old social security number records. We transferred small amounts from the household accounts, $50 here, $75 there, always under the threshold that would trigger Daniel's attention. In 3 weeks, I had $2,000. Not much, but it was mine. The first money that had been truly mine in years. I retrieved my important documents from Daniel's home office safe. I'd learned the combination months ago when I'd watched him open it. Birth certificate, social security card, passport, marriage license. I made copies of everything and hid them with a former coworker who'd been trying to stay in touch despite my isolation. I reconnected with my mother through a secret email account. The first message I sent her was simple. "Mom, I need help. I'm leaving Daniel. Please don't contact me through normal channels. I'll explain everything soon. I love you." She responded within an hour. "Thank God. Tell me what you need." Having her back in my corner felt like finding solid ground after years of quicksand. But the most important piece of the plan was still unresolved. How would I actually leave? Daniel watched me constantly. He tracked my phone, monitored my movements, called at random times throughout the day to check in. I couldn't just pack a bag and walk out. He'd stop me before I reached the door. The answer came from Daniel himself. He announced one evening that his 40th birthday was approaching, and he wanted to throw a proper celebration. A big party at our apartment, all his colleagues and clients, all the people whose opinion mattered to him. A showcase of his success, his perfect life, his perfect wife. "I want you to look absolutely stunning," he said, handing me his credit card. "New dress, hair, makeup, the works. Everyone should see what a lucky man I am." I smiled dutifully and took the card. But inside, I was calculating. A party, a public event. Dozens of witnesses. The perfect stage. I met with Thomas 2 days later and told him about the birthday party. "I want to do it there," I said. "I want to leave in front of everyone." Thomas frowned. "Catherine, that's risky. It could embarrass him, make him more volatile." "He's already volatile," I interrupted. "He just hides it well. And I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of protecting his image while he destroys my life. I want everyone to know what he is. I want to take away the one thing he cares about more than control, his reputation." Thomas studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Then let's make it count. Let's make sure when you walk out that door, you're not just free, you're safe, and he's finished." We spent the next 2 weeks refining every detail. Thomas prepared all the legal documents, timed to be filed with the court the morning of the party. We arranged for a police officer to be on standby in case Daniel became violent. We planned my exit route, where I would go, who would be with me, and we prepared one final weapon, Daniel's own phone. 2 weeks before the party, I installed monitoring software on his phone while he was in the shower. It was the same software he'd used on me, a little bit of poetic justice. Within days, I had access to everything, his emails, his texts, his photos, his browser history, his secret accounts. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Affairs with multiple women, some of whom he'd manipulated and controlled just like me. Messages to friends mocking me, calling me pathetic, stupid, broken. Financial fraud. Evidence of witness tampering in a case he'd handled. Photos and videos I won't describe. Too ugly to put into words. Thomas was right. Daniel wasn't just abusive. He was a monster in a Hugo Boss suit. The day before the party, Daniel cornered me in the kitchen while I was reviewing the catering menu. "You've been different lately," he said, his voice casual, but his eyes sharp. "Quieter, secretive." My heart stopped, but I kept my face neutral. "I'm just stressed about the party. I want everything to be perfect for you." He stepped closer, backing me against the counter. "You're not thinking about doing anything stupid, are you? Because you know you can't leave. You know what would happen if you tried." I'd heard these threats 1,000 times. They used to make me freeze, make me shrink. But now, knowing what I knew, having the plan in place, having Thomas and my mother, and the evidence, and the escape route, they just made me angry. But I didn't let it show. I looked down, submissive and defeated, the role I'd perfected over years. "I would never leave you," I whispered. "You're right, I can't." He smiled, satisfied, and kissed my forehead. "That's my good girl. Now let's make tomorrow perfect. I want everyone to see what a beautiful life we have together." "Of course," I said softly. He left for his office, and I stood alone in the kitchen, my hands shaking with rage and fear and anticipation. Tomorrow it would all be over. Tomorrow I would be free. The day of Daniel's 40th birthday dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect spring Saturdays that felt like a gift from the universe. I woke early, before Daniel, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to control my racing heart. This was it, the last day of my old life. Daniel was in an expansive mood, excited about the party, about being the center of attention. He went for a run, came back and showered, hummed while getting dressed in his expensive suit. He was so confident, so self-assured, so utterly convinced of his control over me and his world. He had no idea what was coming. At noon, the caterers arrived. At 1, the bartenders and servers. At 2, the party planner Daniel had hired swept through, directing staff, arranging flowers, setting up the sound system. Our apartment transformed into something from a magazine, elegant and perfect, just like Daniel wanted. I spent the afternoon getting ready, taking my time with my hair and makeup. I'd bought a dress for the occasion, a stunning red sheath that hugged every curve. Daniel liked me to dress conservatively, modestly. This dress was neither. When I emerged from the bedroom at 5:30, Daniel's eyes widened. "That's quite a dress," he said, and I could hear the disapproval under the words. "You said you wanted me to look stunning," I replied evenly. He opened his mouth to object, then caught himself. His guests would be arriving soon, and he couldn't risk a scene. "You look beautiful," he said instead, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. The first guests arrived at 6. Within an hour, the apartment was full of people, Daniel's law partners, his biggest clients, his college friends, his parents, assorted couples from our building and social circle. 75 people, all dressed beautifully, all drinking expensive champagne, all celebrating the man of the hour. I played my role perfectly. I smiled. I made small talk. I passed hors d'oeuvres. I ensured everyone's glass was full. The perfect hostess. The perfect wife. And all the while, I was watching the clock. Thomas had said 8:30. At 8:30, everything would be in place. The legal documents filed electronically with the courthouse. The officer standing by outside. My escape plan ready to execute. At 8:30, I would be free. Daniel was in his element, holding court in the center of the living room, telling stories, making people laugh, basking in the attention and admiration. I watched him work the room and thought about all the ways he'd worked me, the manipulation, the control, the systematic destruction of who I'd been. No more. At 8:15, Daniel's best man from our wedding, a partner at his firm named Richard, tapped his champagne glass for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for toasts. Let's celebrate this remarkable man on his 40th birthday." The crowd cheered. Daniel beamed, raising his glass in acknowledgement. Richard went first, telling a humorous story about Daniel in law school, praising his brilliance and success. Daniel's father went next, brief and proud. Then Daniel's law partner, his tennis buddy, his college roommate. And then Richard turned to me. "Catherine, would you like to say a few words about your wonderful husband?" The room fell silent, all eyes on me. This was the moment. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone could hear it. But my hands were steady as I took the microphone Richard offered. "Thank you," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'd love to say a few words." I walked to the center of the room, standing next to Daniel. He was smiling, expecting the usual platitudes. "I love him so much. He's my everything. I'm so lucky." I looked at him directly, and I saw the exact moment he realized something was wrong. His smile faltered. His eyes narrowed slightly. Too late. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, I began. Daniel loves being celebrated, and you've all done a wonderful job of celebrating him. You've toasted his success, his brilliance, his charm. You've talked about what an amazing man he is. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. But I want to talk about what an amazing man he really is, because I know him better than anyone in this room. I've lived with him for 4 years. I've been his wife, his partner, his companion. Daniel's face was tightening, but he was trapped. 75 people were watching. He couldn't stop me without causing a scene. Daniel is indeed brilliant, I continued. He's brilliant at manipulation. He's brilliant at control. He's brilliant at making someone believe they're crazy, that they're worthless, that they're nothing without him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel reached for my arm, but I stepped back smoothly. Daniel told me I would never leave him, I said, my voice steady and clear. He told me I couldn't, that I was nothing without him, that I needed him, and for a long time, I believed it. Catherine, Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous, the voice he used behind closed doors. Stop this right now. No, I said simply. I'm done stopping. I'm done being quiet. I'm done pretending. I reached into my clutch. Daniel's eyes widened, suddenly afraid of what I might pull out, which was almost funny, and withdrew his phone, his personal phone, which I'd quietly swapped with an identical backup earlier in the evening. This is Daniel's phone, I announced, holding it up. For the past 2 weeks, I've had access to everything on it. His emails, his texts, his photos, his browser history, all of it. You had no right, Daniel started, his face flushing red. You had no right to monitor my phone for 3 years, I interrupted. But you did. You installed tracking software. You read every text, every email. You controlled where I went, who I saw, what I did. But we'll come back to that. I turned to address the crowd, many of whom were looking deeply uncomfortable, but unable to look away. I want to show you all who Daniel really is. Not the charming lawyer, not the successful businessman, not the devoted husband. The real Daniel. I pulled out the tablet I'd hidden behind the couch earlier and synced it to the TV mounted above the fireplace. With a few taps, Daniel's text messages appeared on the screen, massive and impossible to ignore. Messages to his girlfriend, one of several, apparently calling me pathetic, describing how he'd isolated me from my friends, laughing about how easy it was to control me. Turn that off, Daniel said, his voice shaking with rage. He lunged for the tablet, but Thomas appeared beside me. I hadn't even seen him enter and physically blocked Daniel. Saw I wouldn't, Thomas said quietly. Daniel stared at his own attorney in shock. Thomas! What the hell? Keep going, Catherine, Thomas said calmly. So I did. I showed them the financial fraud, the hidden accounts, the tax evasion. I showed them the messages to other women, the lies, the manipulations. I showed them evidence of witness tampering, of perjury, of ethical violations that would end his career. And then I showed them the surveillance footage from our apartment footage from the hidden cameras I'd installed the week before, showing Daniel threatening me, berating me, backing me against walls, calling me worthless and stupid and broken. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of Daniel's voice from the speakers, cruel and cold in a way none of these people had ever heard before. When I finally turned off the TV, Daniel was standing alone in the center of the room, like everyone had physically moved away from him. His face was white, his hands clenched into fists. You're lying, he said, but his voice was hollow. She's lying. She's having some kind of breakdown. She's not lying, Thomas said, stepping forward. I've verified everything. I have copies of everything, and tomorrow morning, all of it will be submitted to the State Bar Association, along with a formal complaint. You can't! Daniel turned on Thomas. You're my attorney. This is confidential. I'm not your attorney anymore, Thomas said. I resigned this afternoon, and none of this information came from our attorney-client relationship. It came from Catherine, who had every right to access her husband's phone and accounts. I stepped forward, drawing Daniel's attention back to me. I'm leaving you, Daniel, right now, in front of everyone, so there's no confusion about what happened here tonight. You can't, he said, and for the first time, I heard fear in his voice. You have nothing. No money, no job. I have $2,000 in my own bank account, I said. I have my documents. I have evidence of your abuse. I have a restraining order being filed tomorrow morning. I have divorce papers already drafted. I have Thomas as my attorney, and I have my freedom. I took off my wedding ring and set it on the table beside me. Goodbye, Daniel. I turned to walk toward the door, and that's when Daniel snapped. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, and yanked me back. You're not going anywhere, he snarled, and suddenly the mask was completely gone. This was the Daniel I knew, the one behind closed doors. You're mine. You'll always be mine. But this time, I wasn't alone. Thomas moved first, breaking Daniel's grip on my arm. Then Richard, Daniel's best man, stepped forward. Let her go, Daniel. You don't understand, Daniel said desperately, looking around at the crowd of people who'd once admired him. She's confused. She's not well. She needs help. The police are outside, Thomas said calmly. If you touch her again, I'll have you arrested for assault. And given everything else, I don't think that would go well for you. Daniel's hand fell away. He looked around at the room full of people, his colleagues, his clients, his friends, his family, and saw only shock, disgust, and judgment staring back at him. Catherine, his mother said softly from across the room. She looked devastated. Is this true? All of it? I met her eyes and nodded. All of it. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I wasn't sure you'd believe me otherwise. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I believe you. That was it, the last piece of Daniel's perfect facade crumbling. I walked to the door, Thomas beside me, and I didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear Daniel starting to argue, to make excuses, to try to spin the narrative. But it was too late. The truth was out, witnessed by everyone who mattered in his professional and personal life. The police officer Thomas had arranged was indeed waiting outside, along with my mother, who threw her arms around me the moment I emerged into the hallway. You did it, she whispered fiercely. Oh my God, you actually did it. I did, I said, and then, finally, I let myself cry. The aftermath was complicated, messy, and painful, but it was also liberating in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Daniel tried to fight the divorce, but Thomas had prepared too well. The evidence was overwhelming. The documentation was airtight, and the legal strategy was perfect. Within 3 months, I had a restraining order, a divorce settlement that gave me back my financial independence and full legal protection. The State Bar Association opened an investigation into Daniel's conduct. Several of his former clients came forward with their own complaints. His law firm quietly forced him out. His reputation, the thing he'd valued more than anything, was destroyed. He tried to contact me 17 times in the first month, each attempt documented and reported to the authorities. Eventually, he stopped. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to another city trying to start over, but that the legal profession is a small world, and his reputation had preceded him. I don't think about him much anymore. When I do, I feel pity more than anything else. He had everything: success, respect, a wife who once loved him genuinely, and he destroyed it all because he couldn't see me as a person, only as something to own. As for me, the rebuilding was slow but steady. I moved in with my mother for the first 6 months, relearning how to make decisions without fear, how to trust my own judgment, how to exist without constantly calculating someone else's reaction. I started therapy with a counselor who specialized in domestic abuse. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced was real, valid, and not my fault. She helped me process the trauma, the shame, the complicated grief of mourning a relationship that was never what I thought it was. I reconnected with friends I'd lost during my marriage. Some relationships were too damaged to salvage, but others welcomed me back with open arms and no judgment. Sarah, my college roommate, cried when I finally called her and explained everything. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "I just didn't know how to reach you." After a year, I went back to work. It was terrifying at first. Daniel had been right that I'd been out of the workforce for years, that my resume had gaps, that I'd have to start over in many ways. But he'd been wrong about me being worthless. I was smart, capable, and determined. I found a job in project management at a nonprofit, making less money than I had before, but doing work that mattered. I got my own apartment, a small one-bedroom with a balcony facing east, so I could watch the sunrise. I furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing every piece myself. No one told me the couch was too expensive, or the art was stupid, or the dishes were impractical. It was mine, all mine, and that simple freedom was intoxicating. Thomas became an unexpected friend. He never charged me a penny for his representation, calling it penance for waiting too long to act. We had coffee occasionally, and he told me about his sister, about the guilt he still carried. "Helping you," he said once, "doesn't erase what happened to her. But it means her death mattered. It means I learned something." The most surprising development came 18 months after the birthday party. I was at a coffee shop, the same one where Thomas and I had first met to plan my escape, when someone sat down across from me. It was Daniel's mother, Eleanor. I tensed immediately, ready to leave, but she held up her hands. "Please, I just want to talk. Just 5 minutes." I stayed, wary but curious. "I owe you an apology," she said, her eyes red-rimmed. I raised that man. I saw the signs when he was young, the need for control, the inability to handle criticism, the way he manipulated situations. I told myself he'd grow out of it. I made excuses. I enabled him. "Eleanor." "Let me finish," she interrupted gently. "What you did that night, exposing him like that, it was the bravest thing I've ever seen. And it forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for decades. I've been in therapy. I've been educating myself about emotional abuse. And I've been volunteering at a women's shelter, trying to help other women like you." She slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a check. It's not much, but it's from my personal account, not connected to Daniel. I want you to use it for whatever you need: therapy, education, starting over. Consider it restitution for the son I raised." I looked at the check. It was for $50,000. "I can't accept this," I said automatically. "You can, and you will," Eleanor said firmly. "You lost years of your life because of my son. Let me help you reclaim them." I took the check, and we both cried. Sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. 2 years after the birthday party, I was living a life I'd once thought impossible. I had a career I loved, an apartment that felt like a sanctuary, friendships that were real and reciprocal. I'd started dating cautiously, learning to recognize red flags, trusting my instincts again. I'd also started speaking publicly about my experience. I gave talks at women's shelters, wrote articles about recognizing emotional abuse, volunteered with organizations that helped survivors. If my nightmare could help even one woman recognize what was happening to her and find the courage to leave, then it meant something. One evening, I received an email through my blog. It was from a woman named Jennifer, and it said simply, "I read your story. Tonight, at my husband's anniversary party, I'm going to do what you did. Thank you for showing me it's possible. Thank you for being brave first." I sat at my laptop and cried. But this time, they were tears of gratitude and purpose. This was why I'd told my story. This was why I'd been willing to expose my pain publicly. Because somewhere out there, women were trapped just like I had been, thinking they were alone, thinking they were crazy, thinking they could never escape. And I wanted them to know, you can leave. It won't be easy. It will be terrifying and complicated and messy, but you can do it. You are not crazy. You are not worthless. You are not the problem. And you deserve so much more than a cage, no matter how gilded it might be. 3 years after that birthday party, I can finally say I'm happy. Not the fake happiness I performed for Daniel. Not the manic happiness of someone trying to convince themselves everything is fine. Real happiness. Deep happiness. The kind that comes from knowing yourself, trusting yourself, belonging to yourself. I still have hard days. I still have moments of doubt, flashes of fear, nightmares where I'm back in that apartment and can't find the door. Trauma doesn't disappear just because you escape its source. But I also have good days. Great days. Days where I wake up and remember I'm free, and the joy of that simple fact fills my entire chest. I think about that woman I used to be, the one who dropped her wallet in a coffee shop and thought a charming man picking it up was fate. I wish I could go back and warn her. Tell her that fairy tales aren't real, that charm can be a weapon, that love shouldn't make you smaller. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is move forward, keep walking, keep growing, keep reclaiming the pieces of ourselves we lost along the way. And if you're reading this from inside your own cage, if you recognize your own story and mine, I want you to know. The door isn't locked. It never was. He just convinced you it was. You can leave. You will leave. And when you do, there will be people waiting to help you, to catch you, to remind you of who you really are beneath all the things he said about you. You are not his. You never were. You belong to yourself. And that, I promise you, is worth fighting for. On a Tuesday in March, I walked into a birthday party as a prisoner and walked out as a free woman. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was planning, courage, and the help of people who believed I deserved better. 3 years later, I'm still walking, still free, still becoming, and I've never looked back.